Hello, everybody. Welcome to another session of Spring Clean 2024, 2025. My name is Abdul Kazi, and I have my partner in crime, Chris. Hey, Chris, how's it going?
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, glad to be back for another year of this. I think, I don't know, you and I have been doing this for what, maybe 3-4 years now, something like that.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
but yeah, it's a great opportunity to just kind of share what we know with the community, and I'm glad to have you all tune in.
And today we're with a new session. So we're talking about Microsoft Entra Permissions Management. So before we get into the actual meet, let's have some quick introductions. So Chris, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, sir. For those who don't know me, my name is Chris Gill, or Christopher, or CG. I do a little bit of everything, say A to Z within the Microsoft stack. I am awarded Microsoft Azure MVP, but I do, cover a lot of different topics: neurodiversity, training, learning, upskilling, hybrid cloud. So this is how you can contact me. Pretty active on socials. If I'm not active, you might want to check to make sure I'm still here. But aside from that, yeah, this is how you can get a hold of me. We do run a cloud community where we have speakers and whatnot. It's called Come Cloud with Us. So if there's any interest, just let one of us know. We'd be happy to have you. So, Abdul, you're up.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, my name is Abdul Kazi. Been an MVP for a year now. Fairly active in the community. Take part in the Microsoft private previews, involved in that piece. And then, as Chris said, I co-host the Come Cloud with Us meetup with Chris. So if you're a seasoned speaker or a freebie new speaker, we are always looking for speakers. So yeah, come reach out to us. We'd be happy to get you on our show.
Beautiful.
With that being said, let's talk about multi-cloud, right? So I know we've really evolved in the last couple of years. When we really started with the cloud journey, a lot of people wanted to be in the cloud because that was really the buzzword. Like, oh, I'll go to any cloud, GCP, at Microsoft Azure, or AWS. But now, with the a bit of time as cloud has matured and people are like, we really need to be in multiple clouds, especially enterprise customers. I talked a lot about enterprise customers which are already in multiple clouds, and that becomes really a challenge to manage because those are isolated. They don't talk. So if you have environment in AWS and GCP or Azure or AWS, how do you manage that environment from one plane of glass? That's the biggest challenge people have now because we all know we have 10,000 tabs open at one time. So how are you going to manage between those, right? So that's where Microsoft really is starting to shine in. They're coming up with a new product, if you will. It's called the Microsoft Entra Permission Management. And obviously, Microsoft renamed their name from Microsoft Azure Active Directory to Microsoft Entra. So, but in a nutshell, what this tool does. And actually, before we talk about that, the other thing that really is coming up now, we've seen this every day about unmanaged permissions and surface attacks. So we've seen ransomware, people are getting attacks all the time, even incident management breaches on the accounts, so permissions, right? This is the biggest thing. And I know last time, Chris, you and me did a webinar. We were talking about MFA, and MFA was not actually even 100% rolled out.
Right.
In fact, I think that was November or September when we did the Defender for Cloud overview, and we were talking about how MFA is not rolled out, and which pretty much talks about this as well, that IAM, identity and access management, is becoming such a big deal now because across cloud. because every cloud has their own identity, AWS has their own, Azure has its own. Sure, you can take your Active Directory there, but not everybody is going to be doing that way. And then the other challenge is you might have different providers now. So enterprise customers, they're not only using Microsoft Entra, they might have Okta, they might have Deo, they might have other third-party solutions that they have to integrate. That really becomes a pain point from an operational standpoint. How do you manage that? Setting up things is easy, but then on an ongoing basis, that's the biggest challenge. So that's what we're
Right.
seeing in the industry happening. So Chris, what are you seeing? I know you work for a legal firm, so I'm sure you have some fun stories to talk
So
about.
you could probably see me like welling up here as you're talking about this, because I just say for my environment, and I've even talked to other customers, other MVPs about environments that they manage, and so the one thing that's permissions gap is really a big thing. And honestly, right before the session, just doing a little bit of research, I just learned something too. There's this thought or this idea, it's called permission creep index, the PCI, which is interesting. So it's like basically a measurement of risk associated with either excessive or unused permissions. And I look at and think about that as a topic and just say, whether it's recently we had a guest, he was talking about click ops, and we joke, it's somebody going into the UI, clicking and configuring and giving permissions, because like, well, everybody can be an owner, everybody can be a global admin or whatever it might be, some kind of RBAC, role-based access control, or identity control added to something. Might be a storage resource, might be a service, what have you. But it's wild to think that I think too often we kind of point fingers and just judge and say, wow, it was a human that did that. Well, you could also have this over permissive use within, IAC, like, deploying infrastructure as code, or, more like a DevOps approach, where if those aren't done correctly too, now you have a little bit more of a, massive exposure with, hey, I deployed 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 of these same resources, and they'll have the same permission sets. Why? Because I could do it quickly. It was already coded that way. How do I clean that up? How do I get that insight? How do I pull it back near and dear, close to my heart, kind of, wrap our arms around getting that control. So, it's a big thing from an unmanaged perspective. At the end of the day, it's like, from a legal perspective, it's like we have to tell our clients, what controls we have in place, how close we are to, standard CIS controls in our environment, and reviewing and watching, monitoring, rinse, repeat. So, sure, maybe we don't have a ton of resources, maybe we do, doesn't matter. It's, you got to do you, and, basically protect all of the identities and permissions at all costs. So.
No, that's great information there, yeah, because especially you coming from a legal firm, a lot of requirements there. So yeah, that makes sense. So now talking about managing permissions, and Chris, you already talked about this. Today's tactical outdated approaches, and this is what we do, even if we look on-prem environment, grant permission based on job roles and responsibilities. And then IAM, and I love this one because I working with one customer right now as we speak, and this is the biggest challenge. IAM, admins manual grant permissions with our no time base. So think about giving yourself global admin with unlimited time, and then your account gets compromised. Yeah. That's why PIM really comes in, which is a totally different topic. But this should not really be there, right? And then permissions cleanup is manually done. So that on an as needed basis, meaning when somebody leaves, then they'll do it. There's no quarterly reviews. There's no reviews done. Now, the new approach is grant permission based on historical usage or activity, and then where the requirements are, allow temporary access to high-risk permission on demand. So any PIM role, or actually any security roles, even the security readers and all that should be PIM-based, and that should be time limit. So the higher the role, the less time it should be. So let's say global admin should only be given 2 hours time limit. That's it. If you need to work after 2 hours, you have to re-request that. You might have to re-request multiple times a day. That's fine, but then it lowers the footprint of the attack. So that's really crucial these days. And then the last one, continuously monitoring and right-sizing identities to prevent privilege creep. And I know you were talking about that, and you were kind of nodding your head, so I'll let you make a comment there.
Yeah, no, and sorry, I feel like I spilled the beans on that one, so sorry, folks. But yeah, permission creep index again, just it's kind of interesting to be able to not only monitor but figure out it's like what exactly do I need. So maybe I have a vendor that's coming in, a third-party vendor that might be doing a either an audit or like some kind of testing or whatever else. Security testing or evaluation, penetration testing, what have you. This screen just screams of that, where it's like, hey, I'm partnering up with someone for a couple of days, might be a week, might be a month. What exact permissions do I need to give them? Right size based on that usage. How do I kind of handle it? How long? And then, how do I monitor? Is there anything else that we need to remove after the fact? Because there could also be a step up permission change too as we grant these permissions. So, for being honest with ourselves, it's like we need to not only just keep track of what we did grant, but also if there were any additions and changes done over time. So, but yeah, that all comes into that permission creep and just keeping that excessive permission stuff under control.
Exactly. And with that being said, let's talk about the Microsoft Entra Permissions Management and what really it is. So with Microsoft Entra Permission Management, it's really cloud-based infrastructure, right? So and this is CIEM, so Cloud Infrastructure Entitlement Management, where it gives you one plane of glass or comprehensive visibility into permissions assigned to all identities. So as you can see here, AWS, Google Cloud, Azure. You can bring other identity providers. I mentioned Okta, which is a fairly large one. So that's pretty much what you can do with this, and then tie everything together. And the beauty of this is, let's talk about the different use cases now. So mainly permission management allows customers to address 3 use cases. One is discovery, remediation, and monitor. So the biggest challenge is discovery, because the environments are becoming so big now. Everybody is creating accounts. If you don't have proper governance, that is going to be a problem. So just discovery, like how many accounts are even there now, that's a challenge. So permission management is really designed to do discovery, remediate, and then also monitor. So from a discovery standpoint, it does cross cloud provision discovery. So it does for both AWS, Azure, and GCP. And then, like Chris said, it does permission creep index, PCI, so which really takes the periodically evaluates level. So I would say it's pretty much like a score. It's keeping of the risk associated, and based on that, it's going to measure, right? And lastly, under discovery, you have the permission usage analytics. So it takes a look at the permission risk for all identities, and then action and resources as well. So basically, it's giving you a pulse of where you stand in your cloud environment. And then next from that is going to be your remediation. So from a remediation standpoint, customer can right-size the permission. You can say, yeah, we don't want to allow, and like we talked about PIM, we only want to grant permission on demand or automate just in time, which is pretty much PIM. And then anything else can be deleted after 90 days, or grant identity permission on permission for a limited time or as needed. And lastly, it does your monitoring. So, and then we talk about monitoring also comes under the zero trust security piece, which we'll talk about in the next couple of slides. But from a monitoring standpoint, It does a great job of machine learning, so ML. It is ML-powered alerts. It generates for you, and then also gives you forensic reports. So any anomalies that come up, you're like, oh yeah. And it also does unified on the infrastructure side. So any of the IaaS platforms you're running, um, excuse me. So it does a great job on that piece.
Excellent.
So I kind of talked about the discovery, remediation, and monitor. So that's what pretty much does in a nutshell. And then zero trust. I know, Chris, we've talked about this multiple times, and zero trust is like such a big piece. There are different facets of security, identity, networking, but from here, the zero trust, this is the security piece, which you have the, as you can see, there's an older slide because it has the Azure Active Directory should be Entra ID, but
Right.
even from there, this is a multi-cloud approach, and then it
Well,
has
I would say the key points on the slide too, and I know we mentioned earlier, but the verify explicitly. So I look at, it's like, yes, there's this resource that's available. Yes, you may have permissions to access or do something with it, but you need to prove that you are who you say you are, so that you can adjust or work with the resource or whatever else. So
yeah, and the good thing I like about it is also integrates with Microsoft Defender, and Microsoft Defender comes in different flavors. Microsoft Defender for cloud, it's pretty much the one for Azure, and you can tie this up into the Entra Permissions Management. So it really is great from a monitoring standpoint and looking from a log standpoint. So makes it easier from operations side of things. And then now talking about, I know this is a busy slide, but there's quite a bit to talk about here. But as we mentioned, CIEM complements PAM and IGA. So IGA is identity governance. So, and then privilege access management, PAM. And then as you can see, privilege access management is on one side. So you take your just-in-time access. That's really critical, not only for the users, but sometimes on the you have to log into the VM. That's important, because you're not only doing stuff on the account side. So you might need to log into Entra permission, or you might need to log into the Azure portal. Just in time is perfect. Session manager decoding, so everything is recorded there. And then from the other one, privilege identity lifecycle management. That's actually very essential because people leave, things don't get properly. So a lot of companies don't have a onboarding lifecycle or offboarding lifecycle laid out. It only is done when somebody leaves or something happens. Like there's no automatic trigger to this. So that's why having all these features are important, because then you can enforce it. And then your identity governance and administration, like just monitoring the accounts, who's leaving, when they're leaving, what access do they have? Do they have the right privileges? You don't want to over provision people. And then the integration with SaaS applications, as you can see, Box, Salesforce, and others. Even this, the good thing about this is also does on-prem as well. So and enterprise customers are still on-prem, so they have a hybrid environment. So that's also the need and requirement that every company is looking for.
Yeah.
Your comments.
Yeah, I wish I had a virtual pointer. I don't have it hooked up, but I would, for folks that are watching, on the far left side under privilege access management, the just-in-time access. I want to focus in on one key thing, because I think of even for environments that I see folks manage, like a permissions on demand approach for things, right? So if you think about like, how does this all, how is it all relatable to me? I have something that I need to do, right? I could very simply put in some type of ticket. So I'm thinking like, ServiceNow or an ITSM system where I need access to something and I need it either right now or I need it in a couple of hours, or, maybe have a scheduled maintenance the next day and I need it tomorrow for 4 hours. I could go through a workflow to do this permissions on demand approach and say, I need this just in time, just right sized access for, a certain amount of time. I have a ticket that was captured that information, who maybe approved it. It might be some other kind of workflow that falls into place, but it also works with the just-in-time access to give you that permissions for a certain amount of time and revoking when it's done, when you're done with your work. It might be an update or an adjustment change. But that's really nice approach because, from folks from an IT perspective, they could go out and say, all right, this is scoped to maybe a group, in an Entra ID group. Those folks have this type of permission set they can request and do, and whatever it's whether it has an approval gate or not, water under the bridge, but it gives a nice approach to kind of reel this whole diagram together. So
Yeah, no, thanks for that. That's actually very thoughtful. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then let's talk about the product architecture. So which is important because a lot of people think, hey, what's really behind the scenes? So especially given that most of the products are SaaS based, which is great for people because then it provides you high availability. Microsoft is hosting it. You don't have to worry about it. The great thing about this is it is integrated in the Entra portal. So when you log into the Entra portal, it's going to be on your bottom left-hand side, and then you can, it opens up a page where you can take a look, and it pretty much gives you all the data. But yeah, it does a great, so this is on the back end, the architecture, as you can see, data lake, cloud databases and stuff, and the identity, because it is storing a lot of information and has to be really robust on the back end. And then this is more on the collector side. So on the collector service, obviously it is at HTTPS, so all your data is going securely once the data that has been collected. And obviously collector service is coming hosted by Microsoft, but obviously it is coming from your other third party, like within Microsoft itself, the Azure AD, but also AWS and GCP. So you have those connector services there, collecting the service and then throwing it in the data processing and analysis, and that's how it's going to show you all the data that is being collected.
Awesome.
And this is much more of a technical view, and we can spend hours probably on this, but the ones I want to really highlight is the RBAC, because I know Chris mentioned about this role-based access control. This is really the big one because people want to make sure you are providing the right access. So as you can see, it's a reader level. For the subscription, you're not the owner, which is going to be pretty much a no-no. And then you can even do groups. So it provides you groups and IAM permissions. Then the OIDC provider. So which here, as you can see, it lists the OU structure policies. So basically, yeah, this is a great overview of all the technical policies that I have. And then here it talks about the AWS side of things. As you can see, the terminology obviously on AWS is very different than Azure or Entra ID, but same concept. You have the policies, you have the users coming in, you have the roles, and then all pretty much gets tied back to the permissions manager.
Awesome.
And then risk assessment preparation, right? So basically what happens is you set this thing up, and depending on the account, so it depends on how big your environment is. Some accounts that you might have multiple subscriptions. You go in there, you set up the different roles and identities so you can start collecting the data. And then once the collection begins, it is going to take some time to get all the data collected and then provide you a report. And then post-deployment, what happens is post-deployment is usually ready within 24 hours, and it gives you a good comprehensive report. So it tells you what we talked about. It evaluates all your risk, and then it's going to provide you a remediation report as well, just to make sure that you can go and remediate anything that is problematic there. And so now let's talk about the best practices for on-demand workflow, right? So requesting delete permission, that's something no user is going to delete permission, right? So that's something you have to take care of it. Requesting privileged access, we kind of talked about the high privilege access, like the global admin or global reader and whatnot. That should only be through enough just in time. So PIM is a perfect example of that. And then requesting periodic access. So schedule occurring daily, weekly, or monthly, and revoke at the end of the period or timing. And the interesting thing about PIM is, and we do this all the time, is you can request access for advance. So if I want access for, let's say, tomorrow, and I know there's not going to be anybody who's going to be approving it tomorrow. Let's say the manager's off tomorrow. And we want access tomorrow. What we can do is pre-schedule today and say, okay, it's a custom request for tomorrow 9 a.m. and you can request, they approve it. Once that time hits, boom, your access is going to be available. So, PIM works in that very way. Highly recommend people do periodic access rather than just having blatant access every time. Especially on the global admins or global readers, those are high privilege roles. You should not be granted access to them 24/7. And then lastly, for custom alerts, I know alert is going to be a challenge for a lot of people because sometimes you have to have a balance. Too less of alerts and like, oh, I missed this important alerts, and too many alerts. Oh, again, I missed this two important alerts because I have too many. But you have to have alerts for proper accounts. The ones that they call out is Microsoft calling out the break class account or the root AWS global account. So you want to have those permission alerts there in case something happens. So you know that there's something going on with the environment and you get notified right away. Chris, any comments?
No, I mean, I just think about, I suppose there's one small comment, just thinking of, remember who these alerts may be going to, especially with from a custom perspective. It's like you want to adjust for your company. You want to make sure that you don't overly share too much information, right? You want it to be actionable and not disregarded or just deleted or thrown away. So, make sure that as you build these triggers and whatnot, that you're actually not triggering on everything. It's some of the sensitive or edge cases and not sending just everything just because. So
no, makes sense. Valid point there. And lastly, key reports to monitor, right? There's so many built-in reports. As you can see, there are a lot of reports you can build in here, and you can do some custom reports. It provides you great reporting of the guidance of what exactly needs to be done. And this is a really helpful tool to manage all the three environments. And with that being said, if you want to test out, you can go to aka.ms/try permissions management. This is going to give you a 45-day, 90-day trial to test it out. Out of the box, obviously nothing is going to work. You'll have to tie in everything in there. It's going to take some time. But yeah. With that being said, that is pretty much our slide. So given that we are almost out of time as well. But any parting thoughts, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, it just on a couple quick notes. Seeing this, and I'm thinking, like, how do folks? Thank you for the nudge to kind of get folks started, right? You get a trial, get it set up. Where do I go from there? Just very briefly, like, you want to make sure that you're discovering everything. So whatever clouds you're managing, whatever, start slow, start small, but make sure that you're discovering all your environments. The least privileged, I know we harped on it a bunch of times, but you want to make sure that as you're discovering this, the identities, service accounts that you're utilizing, make sure to follow the documentation. Make sure that you're giving just the right amount of privileges. You don't want to over-permiss those accounts that are doing the discovery. The reviews, it's pretty obvious, but rely on your regular reviews, your monitoring, and I always say, last but not least, just make sure that everybody's trained, right? These things change very quickly. I know Abdul and I always talk about that, but it's like, just make sure that folks are up to speed on what they're being asked to do and how to kind of manage the environment effectively. So, but yeah, great job.
Great talk, actually. Thanks so much for that. And with that being said, hopefully the session was helpful, and hopefully you learned something new. Test this out. This is actually up and coming. There's a lot of good features in preview, which I'm looking forward to. And once they become GA, this is definitely a great tool. And this is actually long time coming, because Microsoft bought a company back in the day, and then this is really the offshoot of that. But yeah, hopefully.
Yeah, I think it was Cloud Knox, right? If I remember correctly.
Yes.
So yeah, if anybody's like looking at older documentation, it's a couple steps away from Cloud Knox, but that's where they started. So.
Yep. Yeah. And with that being said, thank you so much. Hopefully you found this session. Thanks, Chris. Again.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. Take care, everyone.
Thanks so much. Bye now.